I would like to welcome you all. Welcome for this second session of the Civic Council on European Democracy. My name is Annemarijn Epker. I am a program editor here at the Balie and also the project leader of the Forum on European Culture, which is a biannual festival on the value of culture for Europe. And I'm really great to see some of you back here today. And also we will welcome some new faces to today's session. I'm really looking forward to it. And we would like to start actually by telling you something about the concept of the Civic Council and what we did also in September, because we organized the first session in September, also online, unfortunately. And we hope to be able to organize the last session live in Warsaw this summer. So we're still hopeful about that, but of course, we are still very uncertain as well. I also wanted to mention our great cooperation for these sessions with European Alternatives, our partner in Italy. It was a great pleasure to work with you. Yuri, would you like to tell something about the council? And then I will tell you about the session of today. You're still on mute. We still don't hear you, Yuri. Maybe I can unmute you. Yuri, you're still on mute.
Yeah, this is better.
Yeah, we hear you.
Thank you very much, Annemarijn. Welcome to everybody. I'm director of the Balie. Yuri Albert is my name, and we came up about 7 years ago with the Forum on European Culture to biannually talk about and give art and culture a platform, because Europe is shaped, in our view, too much by lawyers, bankers, and politicians, and not enough by artists and culture. And we, this year, in September, we had the third edition of the Forum on European Culture, and under the title or the subtitle of We the People, We sind das Volk. And we thought it would be a good idea to try to have public intellectuals meet and talk about the possibility of a European people. Is there something like a European people? Should there be a European people if we want a European democracy? Because isn't it always said that democracy and demos belong to each other? No democracy without demos. Well, you could talk about that actually. You could deny that, but that there's need of a conversation on, who are the European people or peoples. We thought would be obvious and about time, and done by people all over Europe and not by the European Commission or anybody else. So this is the second session of our conversation. We had a start in September in Amsterdam, alas online. We wanted to do this one in Palermo. So we had sort of the Northwestern European location, Southern European location. Now we're doing it online, everybody from its own home. I'm very glad you're here, and we hope that we can do a physical meeting in Warsaw later on this year, but let's see whether that's possible or not. So thank you very, very much for joining in. And I leave the leading of this session to Annemarijn Epker. Thank you, Annemarijn, and very, very happy that you're all here again this morning, this Saturday morning.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yuri. And then about the session of today, because of course the overall question of the Civic Council is actually how can we make our democracies function better? And yesterday we focused on the question how we can hold our politicians accountable in these times where we aren't able to physically meet each other and we're just not sure on which kind of information they base their decisions. And today we will focus on another question, and that is actually how can we make sure that the interests of all groups in society are well represented in our political systems and in our democracies? Because what we at least see in this time is that especially all the restrictions also due to the corona measures have an impact on anyone, of course, everyone in Europe, but we also see that some groups are more heavily targeted than others, and these are the vulnerable groups in society that have also difficulties in amplify their voices and making sure that their interests are heard and being listened to. So that is actually the theme that we're going to discuss today. And we have some great speakers again today, and I'm really happy to introduce them to you. We will start with a keynote by Lina Isa. She is an artist and a theater maker working in Amsterdam, in Palermo, and also in Lebanon sometimes. So she's really she's contributing with a lot of perspectives, I think. And Barbara Lena Keddy will reflect on Lina's session. So we will ask her to reflect on what Lina just proposed. She also prepared a wonderful reflection, and we will also listen to Geraldine Schwartz, who will tell us something about her about the way we look at democracy, and also the distinction between a history-based democracy and a future-oriented democracy. And she will tell us a little bit more about that in the middle of this session. And we would like to end the session in 4 working groups, which I will tell you more about later on in the session, where we will try to formulate some concrete recommendations to politicians. And we will use a Jamboard for that, where you can put post-its on, just to assemble all kind of ideas of which concrete recommendations we could send to our politicians. So that is about today. Just a few practical things before we start with a brief introduction round. I would like to welcome all participants, so both the people who have been joining us already yesterday, but also the new people that are joining today. A really warm welcome to all of you. And also a special welcome to our fantastic graphic facilitator, Marina Roa, who will be making illustrations during this session. Yesterday was a great success already. And if you want to spy on Marina, I can show you how you can do it, because if you click on the 3 buttons in her image, you can spotlight her, and that's the way you can see her screen really big, and you can see what she's doing at the moment. So I'm very much looking forward to that part as well. And please feel free to spy on her somewhere during the session. It would be great if you could mute your microphone if you're not speaking. And if you have any questions, please just ask them in the chat. I would like to propose to do a brief round of introductions, and it really needs to be very concise this time. So I would like to ask you to mention your name and where you're currently located, and then I will give the turn to the next person. So we really hope to do this in less than 5 minutes with a group of 20 participants. And maybe only the contributors can, like the participants can briefly introduce themselves. Simon, can you maybe start and give the right example?
My name is Simon. I'm saying hello to you from Amsterdam, and I'll be taking notes today as a secretary to the session.
Thanks. Barbara.
Hello, I'm Barbara from Rome.
Great. And Marina?
Hello, I'm Marina from Madrid, from Senstripe.
Virginia?
Hello, I'm Virginia from Catania.
Catania. And Marta?
Hi, I'm Marta, originally from Madrid and speaking from Rome, co-organizer of the session with European Alternatives. Welcome.
Pierluigi?
Hi, I'm Pierluigi. I'm currently from Enna, Sicily.
Thank you. Mario?
Hi, I'm Mario, also from Enna right now in Sicily.
Great. Sebastian?
Bastiaan Rijpkema from Amsterdam.
Is your cat joining as well today?
At the moment, she's on the floor, but I think when we start talking, that's her cue to join. So we'll just wait. Yeah.
Antonella.
Hi, good morning to everyone. I'm currently based in Palermo.
And Constanza.
Hi, good morning. I'm Costanza and I'm in Palermo right now. Yes.
Great. Emilia?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Emilia and I'm speaking from Palermo.
Yuri, you have introduced yourself. Geraldine?
Yes, hello. I'm Geraldine. I'm French and German. I'm based in Berlin, and I work in Berlin.
Great. Lina?
I'm at the moment in Palermo.
Georgia?
Hi everyone, I'm Georgia from Palermo as well.
From Palermo. Daniela?
Hi, I'm Daniela. I'm currently in my kitchen in Palermo.
Sara?
Sunny kitchen.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sara from Palermo.
Great. Andrea?
Andrea from Bologna, 33 years old, from the 6,000 Sardines.
Reka? Morning. I'm happy that you're joining as well. You weren't sure, but great to have you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Reka, working in Vienna and based in Budapest.
Thank you. Nicolo?
Hello from Paris.
All right, I think that's it for now. Thank you so much. It was really, really quick. And then I'm happy to announce the first speaker of today, Lina. And Lina, you prepared a keynote, but also an interactive part, right? So you can announce when we're there, and you will also be showing a short video. So please take the word.
Thank you. I would like to propose something. If you feel you're comfortable with that, I would like to invite you all to unmute yourselves. So unless there is a construction work that will disturb everyone from hearing, but even then, see, I would like you to unmute yourselves and to include.
There is an actual construction in the neighborhood, so I won't, but thanks.
Okay, well, to include the voice of the space where you are, to start with, and all your coughs and murmurs and breaths, because I can't feel your response, so it's quite difficult in the space. So for me, the question of how can we include the voices of those who are not yet part of the discussion? I went further to articulate it into how to listen to unheard and unrepresented voices and narratives present in Europe, how to include these voices and narratives in imagining and practicing life and democracy in Europe. So how to undo the dominant, hegemonic, violent and colonial narratives that are also silencing these voices most of the time, how to write new ones and to rewrite the old ones in forms that are not static, but constantly transforming and depending on the people who are writing them and their aspirations as they attempt to give form to democracy. So I will try to reflect on some of these issues through my artistic practice. And I don't have statements to make, but I have lived experiences to share glimpses of with you, hoping it could trigger a conversation and inspiration.
We don't see you anymore. Is that intentionally? Or?
No.
Maybe.
What
yeah,
happened?
this is great. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you.
I'm sorry. So I was born in Beirut, in Lebanon, in 1981, and I moved to Amsterdam to do my master's in 2003 in visual arts, and I stayed there working for 16 years. And I moved the last 2 years to Palermo, where I started a small family. And my I does not want to be without the we. And this we for me and the I are constantly moving and reforming themselves. I believe in the power of vulnerability and empathy. They are key, not only concepts, but embodied experiences that from where I work, from where I try to always search, ask questions. And empathy in the form of taking action. So not only feeling for others, but really finding forms to take action and to take responsibility. And my most inspiring and urgent questions in my work have been, what if I took your place? Can I feel what you feel? Can my body remember what your body remembers? And that kind of became clear in 2006. As a student from Lebanon doing my master's in the Netherlands, they refused to renew my student visa for bureaucratic reasons. So I appealed against this decision, and having appealed, I should stay in the Netherlands, so I couldn't move. And it took a year and a half for them to give an answer back. So in this time, I had an urgency to connect to home. So I started this process where I did a casting. I asked someone to go in my place to Lebanon, and I cast this replacement. Her name was Aitana, a Spanish choreographer, and she went to Lebanon for 10 days as my stand-in. And stand-in is a term used in cinema for someone who substitutes the main character while they are preparing the scene. Aitana lived with my parents and visited all people and places that constitute for me the idea of home. She did a lot of tasks that I gave her in a handwritten notebook, 150 pages of day by day, how to move, how to respond, what to smell, smell the breath of my mother after coffee, touch the hand of my father, how to hug every person specifically. So a lot of embodied memories. So her body, or my body, which is in this political state of exception, of exclusion within these systems of borders and nation states, it couldn't move. Her body could move. And in this process, this refusal or these borders became a generative space where we could negotiate the idea or the construction of identity, where we could also remove identity from its locatedness in a certain place, in a geographic place, and also from its singularity, from being fixed. It opened the wide dimension of empathy and co-authorship to explore. So what did she remember for me, through me? What did I remember for her, through her? All the others involved there, but also all the audience later that were a very crucial or very important aspect of this, partners in this experience, because they also stimulated us to generate questions and experiences and reshape or actually to explore further this performativity of identity and place, and also stimulated them to reflect on their way of remembering, of creating narratives. So after a few years of this project, I still in this experience of being a migrant, being dislocated somehow, I placed an advertisement in the newspaper asking people if I could take their place for an hour, a day, or a week in one situation or another in their life. So this kind of location or geography became more the body or the place of someone else, of a stranger. And I replaced 13 people in different situations and roles in their lives. And whether to disappear in the life of a stranger or to perform better than them, their own lives, because some of them were kind of making this comment. So all these were confrontations with the vulnerability of this construction we call identity or subject. And it offered a very interesting, intimate way of listening to each other, to what we embody, and also trying to feel what another feels. It was a real profound displacement of the I, of that and an attempt to include also a multiplicity of other bodies, of other subjects, of other locations, places, sorry. And to include also my migrant body in places where actually maybe it could seem not welcome or not easy to find its own place. So maybe we could look at this as a form of democratizing the self, decentralizing it, including other selves and voices and realities into it. and for me, it's very important that this strive for democracy does not become a way of confirming or empowering certain identities or privileging some or assuming that some are better or some ways of life or values. So it's something that cannot be taught or imposed or multiplied. It's something that needs to happen by practice, no? And by being in relationship with others. So that's kind of the core also of my practice. And in the line of these practices, of these projects, if you want, I arrived to a form of working with others, also with groups, like also with journalists or activists, also festival audience, we're also kind of still testing this idea of taking in the story or something of someone else and conserving it, also within the context of migrants being a threat to national identities or to certain cultural heritage that certain groups or the country is kind of attached to. I was thinking, what if we memorize the stories of others? If I would learn, so in this workshop, you would learn the story of someone else, memorize it, and retell it in the same spot to another person. And in this process of trying to learn, to listen, to be attentive to which words, how do people articulate themselves, the intonation of the voice, and to carry it, like to put it here, and then to share it. Again, within that space of responsibility, maybe we can start to care, to preserve each other's stories and beings, but also allow ourselves to transform them. Because with our voice, with different words we use, this is what happens. So I'm running out of time. My alarm was on. Okay. So, so this part is mainly what I just told you about, is a practice of inclusion and aspiration for democracies through unpacking the self and the systems of constructing identity. But next I will say two things about two other projects which are more practice of inclusion within institutions. One is referring to a project I did in Amsterdam at the medical school, medical university, where I was invited first to do one intervention, and then it became a 6-year process where we worked together with students, doctors, directors, teachers to decolonize, if you want, or unpack the curriculum, which is very white Western idea about body, but also about sickness, about health, but also in most of its cases and representation of body in the books, in the way it's told. It has a very dominant norm, which is also the white male mainly as well. So it was an amazing process where really it took a long time also for many students and teachers to acknowledge whether being discriminated or being oppressed or being discriminating. And it was an interesting collaboration between those who represent the dominant norm, whether they are students or the teachers, and those who do not. If we will have time later, we will show the video. Otherwise, I will share the link with the people and they can watch it entirely. Maybe I think it's better. Yeah, and the other project, what do you think, Anna-Marie?
Yeah, I think it's good to share maybe the link in the chat. Maybe Simon,
sure,
you do that so people can watch it afterwards.
Yeah. It's a video where we work together. It became part of a training that the students give to teachers, but also they have been going to Germany, Switzerland, to many other medical universities themselves, giving a kind of workshops, discussions, using also this video as an introduction, which reflects on it's called Variations on White. And we worked on this together. So you just also see the tone of this work that we do, the kind of sensitivity we worked with. And the other projects, sorry, I'm throwing many things at you, but we can pick later on what we would like. The last thing I would like to share is something I did recently here in Palermo the idea started during the lockdown, me being at home, eating 3 good healthy meals full of fruits and vegetables that are picked by workers that are totally exploited without documents, in very precarious conditions, whether during Corona or before, forever they have been exploited and are still. So it's not only during the Corona crisis. I felt a great need to be in conversation, to start a real relationship, to be present in the presence of this responsibility I feel, because I feel entangled. I feel I'm part of the system also that exploits. And there was a sanatoria, a law that they would give them 6 months permit during the Corona time so they can work. But of course, it didn't serve most of these workers. But I decided to go to one camp of the Senegalese land workers and to talk to them about this law, trying to think, can we include their ideas about how this law should be written? But we soon came after that actually this law is outdated. It's that it doesn't, they cannot even access it. They are not seen by this law at all. So it's actually more maybe up to the Italian citizens or the European citizens to write these laws, to demand to be part of writing this justice. And what we did is actually try to connect to their identities, to their selves, that they cannot establish an identity here, and they cannot also connect to who they are there back home. They are cut off, both living in this limbo. So the work was more to exchange on that. So my work has always been about creating conditions for this encounter and establishing relations and asking questions of how to do that with care. I would like to propose my proposal to continue this conversation, these 2 hours together, is to take 5 minutes, each of us, to visualize someone that you feel has to be included now here in this conversation, or some part of yourself that you would like to include here or in the political life or in the social life we live. And to invite this person by visualizing them, by calling their face to come in, to arrive to you, and to close your eyes maybe, and to be with them. And then to type in the chat, maybe not in fragments, but just type everything you would like to type and then send. A description of this person, maybe a very brief one. You could start with a name. You could start with the age. You could start where you feel you want to start, and also maybe one line inviting him, her, them, saying, I would like to meet or to encounter this or that in you, or to include this or that. And we will take a few minutes afterwards to read through the chat, maybe calling in their presence to be part of this conversation. And the idea is that to have those faces in mind, and instead of speaking about groups or others, or to be in the abstract, to kind of connect it to a presence. Thank you so much for your attention. And yeah, do you agree? Would you like to contribute to this proposal, to pick it up?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, of course, yes.
You're all muted still? Oh, yeah. Okay, lovely. So let's take 5 minutes to do that. Is that okay, Anna Marijn?
Yeah. Maybe just take a few minutes to write something down, and then we will speak about it in a few minutes. So, yeah.
So we post it in the chat, or
if you're comfortable with that, yes. Then we are all can have access to these presences, faces, people.
Yeah. Okay.
But first, really invite them in to your. What about them really that you want to include? So.
Really interesting comments coming in already. So I think we can start discussing some of them in a minute. If you would like to share something, please just send it in the chat.
If you don't mind, Anna-Marijn, or also depends if the group has a need to discuss. I mean, this term for me, it's the proposal is more to read, to take a moment also to read them all, maybe quietly, or if somebody has a question on something, it's just a moment to include, because I don't know if there is time to discuss or if that is the need. For me, the need was to really acknowledge who is not here. Yeah. No? And see how that can inform how we will talk to each other afterwards. So, but also depends on you guys, what is your need? So you can decide.
Yeah, just like take a moment to read everything.
Oh, I lost mine.
I think we have read most of the stories so far, and otherwise you can maybe read them during the rest of the session. I think it's really great that we have invited, that we have doubled the group with a lot of important perspectives and a lot of important persons. So thank you very much, Lina, for this this introduction and this opening statement. Is there anyone who still has a question on this specific part? To Lina. No. Lina, I was wondering, maybe just to open up the conversation, and then I will go to the rest of the participants, but can you maybe say something about the effect of these kind of exercises? So what if we would do this all the time? What would be the effect on our democratic systems? How does it really help?
You mean something like we're doing now?
Yeah, something that we're doing now, and also something that you are doing in your work, as you explained. How does it improve the democratic system?
For me, it improves because, for me, it doesn't improve the democratic system, because it's, for me, that democratic system is not functioning at all. So, for me, it's more about it creates spaces to practice how we can achieve a sense of democracy together. So for me, I try to create conditions through these encounters, to create conditions with care, with reflecting on my position. What do I embody? What are my interests? Which systems do I represent? Making space to understand those of the other or the others I'm involved with, and to make an attempt to step into each other's positions or to check how these are. And within that space of exploring what kind of relation we need from these positions we occupy and sometimes strengthen or empower, how can we shift? How can we move towards each other? And in that space is a practice of sharing creating a common, like acknowledging the interests, the differences, allowing the differences, and also understanding that equality, how kind of democratic systems try to also bring it in, is not always just. It's not justice, because like somewhere where, like in the medical school, it is presented as all the students have equal chances because they all have access to, in the Netherlands, all these students have access to this educational system, but it is totally not equal because they don't have equal chances and you cannot treat them equally, no? So for me, it's about unpacking also where these things fail and also what are these, so there is where...
Yeah, I think it's really important to have these discussions with several groups and with several people, and also really to meet each other and to see each other. And I think that's also really important, and something that we are missing now is that citizens and politicians really meet each other and be able to have a conversation and to know each other's perspectives. I think that is indeed really important. Are there any questions at the moment? And otherwise, I don't see any hands raised. Otherwise, I would like to go to Barbara, who prepared a reflection.
Yes, I'm seeing Calypso's hand up.
Oh, Calypso.
Barbara, I'm happy to wait until you speak. I wanted to.
I don't hear you.
Can't hear you so well.
No, I think that you're
fine.
So good.
I'll say.
But I think I understand you right if you're saying that we can first go to Barbara and then come back to you, Calypso.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, Barbara.
Oh, good morning. My name is Barbara, as I said before. I live in Rome. I'm from Argentina. And today I am here as a feminist activist. So what I evoked and I asked to join is my collective, are the women I am working with to create public spaces. As a feminist activist, I'm one of the founders of a feminist bookshop and bar named Tuba in Rome. And we also run a women's writers festival named Inquiete. So really the focus of my activism has been so far to create public spaces attended by women, but open to everybody. We mainly intervene in city squares as we want to encourage random participation and build a community space while meanwhile being open to and facilitating encounters. We really wanted to decrease the intentionality and the willingness required to participate to a feminist public space as much as possible. We believe that cultural spaces are spaces of citizenship and democracy, but are mainly traditionally male-dominated, especially in Mediterranean cultures. Therefore, a public space ruled by women, it's an experience that most people often don't have. What changes radically is the feeling of being at ease, the possibility to turn off the alarm against potential aggressions. It really challenges the patriarchal language. Redefining public spaces is not the only way we think about inclusivity. We make sure that our activities are free and ticketless, therefore open to everybody. We avoid architectural barriers, translate our events to sign language, and organize a children's space meant to facilitate the participation of parents. It is our belief that open and safe spaces have the potential to liberate creative energies. But saying we are women is really not enough to make Inquiete a transformative space. We have a collective curation. Our collective is made by 12 women with different backgrounds. We work by consent, but consent is nothing without trust. So I would really like to stress out that we work with trust towards one another. Every year we have an assembly with writers. We ask them what they would like to find in the festival and what they would like to bring to the festival. Opening as much as possible the possibility to make proposals, not only to writers. We have an open call for proposals for the festival. We will receive proposals of any kind, from workshops to book launches to whatever, and it's really whatever. Sometimes we receive too many proposals, and we really try to keep it open. And I think that it's another point that makes this project interesting to me. It's that we don't pretend to know everything. And as we don't pretend to know everything, we don't pretend to represent everybody. I mean, saying women, it's not enough to make it a transformative space, but it's not enough also because it's not a one-size-fits-all definition. So we really try to make our program diverse, as diverse is the world and the society we live in. So we take care of having different generations, backgrounds. We make sure that the LGBTQ narratives are into the festival, that we provide a space for visibility to non-native Italian writers, that we include disabled writers. At the same time, we really try to avoid to confine the voices of these vulnerabilities to topics specific to their own instances. We give meaning to their identity as a viewpoint rather than as a variable. I hate it when you know, I'm invited as a feminist to speak about women all the time. And I try to avoid to have, like, for instance, Black writers speaking always about racism in Italy, because I think that they have things to say about their own work and literature besides the racism that they can experience. As being a literature festival, we also try to have a good mix of a good balance of mainstream and niche, of big publishers and super independent and micro publishers. And we think that the two audiences really contaminate one another, and it increases the audience for everybody. At the same time, we do have a program for emerging voices, and we like to work in an interdisciplinary way. So actresses are involved in the festival, as well as visual artists. It's really grassroots. It's really non-institutional as a festival. There's a lot of do-it-yourself. And I think that's what makes it funny to organize. We are a collective of 12. Every year we have 120 guests. We activate 60 volunteers, and we also have a crowdfunding that involves more or less 300 people. So in the end, our math is that to make a festival, we need 500 people. So this is also, we mean a festival not as a showcase, but as a space where we can build community. And the effort is really to acknowledge each other, to listen to each other, give voice to each other and to build collaborative relationships among organizers, artists, as well as the audience. And to conclude, I would really like to stress out that the audience is fundamental. Without the audience, nothing is worth. And as many other cultural events, our last edition was digital. We wanted from one side to keep the community alive, but at the same time, we did not want to say, okay, this was the festival. Now we're doing the same exact thing, just online. So we reinvented the format and we provided a space for a collective reflection on COVID. We think that many of us had to deal with COVID and we really didn't have so many collective spaces to think about it and to elaborate the experience together. So we spoke about grief, vulnerability, resistance, motherhood. At the same time, I really felt with this digital edition how much bodies matter. It's really what makes the difference, to meet each other in person. And also I kind of evoked how an active audience is a silent audience. If I remind the last edition we did in presence, I have this feeling of hundreds of people silent, listening to two writers. And I think that sharing that experience creates a bond among people. You can almost see an invisible thread linking all the people inhabiting the space together. So we try to build a feminist space, but it's really the people who experience it, the ones that provide it meaning.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Barbara, for sharing your work and your story. It sounds really, really interesting. And just a quick question before we go to the rest of the participants of today. I was wondering, do you also aim for any political impact, or is your most important goal to build grassroots communities, or do you also try to reach politicians and maybe people who don't specifically agree with all the points you
we don't have a specific focus towards politicians, but inside the festival we do have discussions about the women's conditions of work in the creative industry, for example. We have an observatory where we monitor how many women are involved in literary festivals, in the literary critique. So we do try to make it a space that it's political in itself, but it's also addressing policy more than politicians.
Is there someone who wants to react still to Lina's keynote or to Barbara's keynote? I also had a question, and maybe for you, for the group, because of course we saw some beautiful examples of cultural performances and festivals and things we could do. But looking at this question, and we also have Bastia Rijpkema here, for example, I'm also curious what kind of institutional things we could think of when we're trying to give a voice to more people, or to show the interests of also the more vulnerable groups in society. Bastian, do you have an idea about that?
Yes, maybe a few thoughts. And maybe it's more related to the specific groups I was thinking of also in my reflection that was asked by Lina. So in my own visualization, and because it's, of course, the things you visualize are also very close to your own experience and the things you are working with. And for me, very important is, I think, to include also new generations. So I was thinking about my students in my visualization. So these students are coming to Leiden from all over the Netherlands so in my case, to participate in our master's program. And I think they are having a particularly hard time because I don't want to sound too dramatic, because a lot of the other experience that were shared, I think also in the chat, but also in the talks that we heard before, are much worse, I would say, than the position probably of my students. But I would also not want to take it too lightly, because they come from all over the Netherlands, and they leave behind their friends and family and connections to start a new intellectual part of their lives. And now I speak on a very regular basis to my students over the phone, and they are completely isolated with no new connections. They are in this new life, but it's not a new life, because they don't have the things they came for, the intimate connections with a group of new, fresh people that are thinking about how we should realize all kinds of things in the world. And in particular, I think they are feeling that they are not heard or seen that well by national politics in the corona situation. So, and that's how it links, I would say, to the institutional question, because one of the avenues in my work now is how to make democracy and our parliament more responsive to the questions of new generations and more long-term questions. And one of the things I've proposed actually also in the Bali before, in I think December 2019, in a session on Karl Popper actually, I proposed that maybe our Senate in the Netherlands, we should exchange it or swap it with a different institution, namely a future chamber, so that we should make the Senate into a chamber that is assembled by lottery, so not by voting, but by lottery, and that their only task is that they should reflect on questions for not the next 5 years, but maybe the next 30 years or even longer. And that they have an extra check on the more representative lower house of the parliament. And of course, there are much more complicated details of how this institutionally should be shaped, this proposal. And there are proposals that are being done that are going in this direction, also in different places in the world and also by different thinkers. But I think such an institutional, quite strong change might be necessary to make our politics more susceptible to long-term challenges, and also to make a politics that is more susceptible to the questions of very young people that are indeed our most long-term investment.
Yeah, I think you mentioned young people, but of course we mentioned very different groups already today, which actually need to be better represented. Just a quick question to you, Bastian. What do you think? Do you think that people chosen by lottery are better capable of representing the views of different groups in society than people with a lot of political experience or who really aim for a political career?
Now, for me, the reason to make this extra chamber a chamber by lot is that I want to make away or do away with party politics in this specific chamber. So if we would have two chambers that are both elected, then we would have a discussion along party politic lines in the regular chamber of parliament. But then when we get to the chamber that has to look into future questions, we would have a duplication of the party politics. And I think this is something that could hamper the long-term vision. So I would say correcting party politics in the one chamber with a chamber that is selected by lot can really realize this correction and not duplicate the party politics dynamics of the regular chamber of parliament. So it's a combination. Yeah.
Is there anyone who wants to react or has some thoughts on this proposal? Daniela?
I totally agree with Bastian. I my students are much younger than yours, Bastian, because they are between 10 and 14. But I think it's not only politicians who don't listen to them, it's the adult world. So we really need to listen to them, and especially the ones who are a bit older, the ones who are 13, 14. I started noticing that they are deeply changing. The way that they attend schools in Italy at the moment, at least in my region, but they are they've been changing a lot, and that worries me, because the way they feel about their future, the imminent future, and their far future is doomed, I'd say, at the moment. So I'm really worried about what they're going through at the moment in Italy, but I think it's the same everywhere in the world. I don't think there are differences. So
yeah, I think it definitely is. Thank you so much. Calypso, I also see you again, and I was wondering, do you still want to add something to Lina's keynote, or maybe the connection is better now?
Yes, can you hear me? Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes, no, I actually, I wanted to connect what we've heard this morning and it's all the way to Bastian. And first of all, I was really, really touched by Lina's intervention. I mean, it's not just a talk, it's kind of an intervention inside our own minds and bodies. And I thought this was quite marvelous. And, you know, I often use, when I teach or give talks, lots of immersive kind of interactive approaches, people introducing themselves to each other and all of that, you know, the whole empathetic approach. But I think this way of convening the other or some other or my other and making him or her the other of somebody else because I'm writing about them is very profound. And your own story, Lina, is your whole journey in doing this, you know, making explicit what many of us try to do in various ways, but you share it and expand from it. So I thought that was brilliant. And I guess the bigger point I want to make is that, you know, our conversations are presumably about democracy. And the question for us is what is the balance between the horizontal and the vertical, if I can put it in these kind of jargony but simple ways. Because the story that Lina is saying, and also the story of Barbara and her festival that sounds so wonderful, you know, are horizontal stories. They are about society really not only knowing itself and acting through that knowledge. What Castoriadis, the Franco-Greek philosopher, called l'institution imaginaire de la société. And I've thought about it a lot under the pandemic lockdown, because I think that this has been a moment where we have watched each other watching each other, when we, you know, become conscious that our future is in our hands, literally washing our hands, the way we behave, that all these circles, our horizontal circle, my family, my neighborhood, my festival, my online stuff. And so my first kind of lesson from listening to Lina and Barbara is to ask, you know, how do we use these experiences as a mode of, you know, societal contagion, pathetic contagion, beyond the, I know you have 300 people, but, and to Bastian, I would say that it's only through this mindset and this practice of horizontality that we can really do the kind of democratic innovation that you're very rightly talking about. And there are many attempts to introduce the long-term future in our democratic logic. Wales has some really interesting stuff, and there are all these experiments, and we do want the next generation, but they don't, you know, their lives. I mean, if I think of my kids and my students, they, you know, before COVID, the biggest thing in their lives was going to music festivals or theater festival. Like festivals is their lives. But these are totally horizontal. And in a way, they would be tainted or spoiled if they became political today. And that's kind of interesting. So it's kind of a question how, and in fact, to Balie and to what we're doing today, is there any way to think about very concretely, you know, how do you create these kinds of horizontal contagion, ultimately to serve a democratic ethos? Yeah, so I mean, in fact, it's a question back to the group.
It's indeed a really good question, Calypso, and thank you so much, first of all, for your wonderful kind of conclusions and also reflection actually on what Lina and what Bastian have said before. But it's an important question, like what can we do in order to improve this democratic culture in a horizontal way within our own communities and our own institutions, and take that as a start for real change. Is there someone who wants to share his or her ideas about it? Lina, would you like to react?
I don't know how, I mean, the Balie has also a lot of work to do to kind of diversify itself. I mean, there's a lot of work within also institutions that are very active. No, what for me, what I also wanted to add, to keep reflecting on is this idea of representation, no? Because for me, it's at the core of my struggle between it's actually also sorry, my terms are like more in the poetic, but for me it's a painful space. Representation is the space of pain. It's not a neutral space. It's so for me the work of representing someone else, or trying to write a law that represents underprivileged or like this kind of abused people, these exploited people, politicians who represent, no, like this idea of democracy as a space where the people are represented. For me, already that space to unpack this idea, what does it mean to represent, is where through my work is the proposal, no, this idea of distrusting representation, no, like problematizing it, also maybe not per se having it as this desire, no, this ultimate desire or need to represent everyone. So I think we need to search for something other than a representation, someone that stands for someone per se, but something needs to merge, no? Because we are also separating politicians and citizens. I always think, aren't they citizens? I mean, and where is their where are they part of the society, no? And why are we also connecting democracy now so directly to, I mean, I know there is in this program a need at the end to deliver a message to politicians, but I think like the need is more to understand how, I'm not so interested actually in there is so much work to do beyond, and there's beyond their representation of us, because I don't believe in it. I mean, it's like for me totally failed, never really worked so well. So we need to find other systems, I think, of representation.
And I think you already started with that, Lina, in your work, right? That's what you're doing actually, to try to find other ways of engaging with each other and having a conversation. Sure. It's a pity I don't see people raise their virtual hands at the moment, but I heard that Nicolo wanted to contribute something. So I would like to invite Nicolo and then take a small break of 10 minutes.
Thanks. I mean, I see a couple of other virtual hands in case you don't see them. I see Reika's hand and I see Antonella's hand. So,
yeah, I'm passing the message.
Thanks, Martha. Zoom is sometimes playing tricks on us. I also wanted to pay testament to Lena's approach. I think it's a beautiful way to open up a conversation. One thing I noticed in the last week was there was a Eurobarometer poll done, as there regularly are by the European institutions, this time on the future of Europe and people's priorities for the future of Europe. And a little bit unexpectedly for those of us that have to follow these polls for professional reasons, that one of the main priorities that came out this time was people said, our priority for the future of Europe is having comparable living conditions between countries in the European Union. And I think that that is a basis on which Europe really can think through its future. Maybe it took a pandemic and 10 years of catastrophic policy failure at a European level to deal with crises which have built one upon the other, not to mention the situation of the most vulnerable, for people to start to actively compare their living conditions and perhaps realize that unless there's some common decent living conditions, well, at some point it's not just other people's problems, it can also become your problem directly. That's the kind of revelation that health crises realize to us. You can try to distance yourself from the poor conditions, but at some point the poor conditions will also catch up with you, whether it's a pandemic or in other ways. And so comparable living conditions emerges as a priority. And I think it's also a realistic kind of approach because it's not totally abstracting from people's personal self-interest. No doubt each of us has a self-interest in having decent living conditions, but also making the comparison with others. And then I think that, you know, if that's our starting point, we have to acknowledge that in Europe, broadly, there's been a spectacular increase in inequality, a dramatic increase in poverty, of course, particularly amongst the most vulnerable groups. And as I said, there's been what I would characterize as a catastrophic policy failure to deal with it. And, you know, if we wanted to have a sense of how far we are in the European Union from adequately dealing with these things, well, you know, look at the United States, which just this last week was able to pass a $2 trillion recovery plan. The European Union was kind of pleased with itself last July because they were able to agree on a 700 billion recovery plan. Now, you don't need to be too good at mathematics to realize there's a huge difference between 2 trillion, which is predicted to reduce poverty in the US by at least a third, and 700 billion. And so I think that we need to be, you know, it's not so much a problem of unclear or overly complex institutions or opaque decision-making. It's a matter of calling out quite directly what is happening, that Europe is one of the richest continents on the planet. It's a huge market. It has the resources to address these problems, whether it's poverty or the scandalous way we treat migrants or investing in our children's futures. But it chooses not to for the moment, or it chooses to only to do it in a very symbolic kind of way. And starting from that common realization, then I think we can build political power, to call it directly. We can build political power amongst not only the dispossessed, but also all of us who are scandalized about this. And then we'll be able to do something about it.
Thank you so much, Nicolo. So start calling out the problems we're facing in Europe now and start change from there. I think that's a good statement. I would like to announce a short break of 10 minutes. So I hope to see you back at 11:23. And then we go to the second part of the session, and we will listen to Geraldine Schwartz, who prepared a statement on European democracies and the future of our European democracy. So I will see you back in 10 minutes. And please also feel free to take a look at Marina's work in the meantime.
Sorry, Marisa, are you still on here? Just, no, she's gone. Okay.
Antonella, I just see your hand raised, so maybe we could start with you and Reka, and then go to the next part with Geraldine.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't make you the co-host, but I am the host, as you can see. But it's fixed now, and I see your hands.
Okay, don't worry. Thank you. I mean, there are many things that I would like to say, and like, of course, many inputs and many thoughts and interesting starting points for discussion and debates. But anyway, I would like to be focused on Lina's work because I'm feeling like very close to her because apart from my job, I am a theater trainer, and I always use this kind of like exercise and practices to with people like from youth to migrants to any kind of target groups that could be interested to like this kind of workshops and practices. So. But in particular, I was thinking about her thoughts on horizontal spaces and her provocation on how to connect citizens with institutions and this kind of gap that there is always during a debate or discussion on any kind of course, my starting point, and maybe it's much more related to the discourse that we were doing yesterday. It's like how less inclusive it became with the COVID for those who did not even previously have the power and voice to be heard. Because for me, like the COVID-19, it's a Pandora's box. So a Pandora's box of inequalities, injustices, and social gaps, gender issues, etc., etc. But this is another, maybe another starting point for the discussion. It's a sort of statement. But by the way, the Lina's work like reminds me an experience that I had during a conflict mediation training course for a gender perspective. I mean, I took part in this training course like a couple of years ago, and for many times. Like it was a very explosive experience because we were women coming from all the Mediterranean area countries, and our cultural diversity, our religious differences, our heterogeneity was our power, and with like a common denominator being women together in the same place. So it was a very great experience, and like once we did this exercise of like putting yourself in someone else's place to imagine what it would be like to be someone else. And you just imagine that we were coming from Italy, from Greece, from Egypt, from other countries, from Middle East and Tunisia, and from Palestine and Israel. So, I mean, we did this exercise, and of course, you just imagine what came out from that exercise, because the Palestinian was putting her shoes in the Israeli woman. So, I mean, at a certain point, we got stuck, because when we were acting, like pretending to or representing like a normal citizen, it was much more like okay, like it was quite okay, because we were discussing as like a normal debate, an horizontal. Okay, it was like quite like engaging, but still okay. But when we were doing, like when we were acting as institutions, we got stuck because we were starting thinking about agendas and then political decisions, and then I don't know, the Palestinian was saying, okay, I am like an Israel political representative, but I don't know how, and I don't know why I acted like this, and this, and then vice versa. So I mean, we got stuck because it was very difficult. So, and this like Lina's work gave me this it reminds me a lot this experience, and still I'm thinking about this very big gap that there is among citizens and institutions. Yeah, so that's just one of the millions of things that I have in my head. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonella. And it also sounds like a great opportunity maybe for a future cooperation or a project together. Yeah, Lina, just to respond, then we go to Reka, and then we really go to Geraldine, because we have a packed agenda for today, but I want to give you the opportunity to react.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Antonella, about how these institutions we can still we can blur their kind of body as a closed fixed thing, no? Because they are, once we kind of through these practices kind of make them into persons, positions again, no? So for me, then this gap, it's different when you do it with one person who represents or feels that they represent an institution, or you start to work with the institution as a whole on many levels, no? Like we did in the university, no? Because then you start to feel that you are part of this place, but you are also part of the society. And the very interesting thing was that many people said, yeah, but outside the school, I do differently. At home, I follow other norms. But why you don't bring these norms here? Or actually you do bring them, but you are professional and neutral, and you are leaving them at home. But they are constantly informing the decisions and the way you choose your vocabulary, the way you dress yourself, the way you enter the room, all these things. So for me, it's a gap, but it's also not a gap, you know, and how we can do this work on all these kind of levels within the body of the bodies of an institution. No? But thank you, great.
Thank you. Yeah, Reka, the last words in this part of the discussion for you. Maybe you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, the different devices get caught up with each other. I hope the drilling is not too loud. But anyway, I am thoroughly fascinated, especially by this medical experiment with, you know, just basically pointing out the inherent bias in, well, mainly in Western medicine, but it's a very invasive and oftentimes, you know, pervasive institution that just permeates our societies. But I also want to draw attention to a problem here, and that is, I am also very touched by this this amazing imaginary of stepping into someone's shoes, or even more, somebody inviting another person to step into their shoes, step into their role, and experience their life for them. But I think there's an extreme and very important difference between somebody asking for it or volunteering for it, and then directing the experiment, and between somebody, let's use the word for the lack of a better expression, sort of self-appointing themselves as a representative for someone they are not, or someone they are not of, right? So representation can go awry very easily, especially when somebody claims to speak for people who are not represented, and in spaces where they are consistently not represented. This is, of course, always my go-to. This is always going to be my go-to. Roma representation in Europe barely exists, and when it does, it's not flawed, it's just abhorrent in most places, with a few exceptions. There's school curricula studies that prove this, and you know, we all have lived experiences of at least Roma missing from this discourse or being used as scapegoats. Now the trouble is, someone from a privileged position or just a very different position cannot effectively speak for them, I think that would still be ripping people, unrepresented people or marginalized people of their own ability to speak, right? So the only responsible decision here would be to push for these people to get their fair place to speak for themselves. Now that's a very tricky thing because there's a long path to get there. And many of us, myself included on multiple occasions, can be accused of virtue signaling or speaking for people without being appointed and so on. And these are all fair criticisms. So I do resort to the very practical examples that I can bring up as an editor and as a contributing writer for years on end, that whenever you step through a corridor, as you do, because somehow editors at some point realized I'd say 6 or 7 years ago, that maybe women can actually write opinion pieces for the paper that I first started to write opinion pieces for. And it just occurred to them that it's humanly possible. So when you do step through that door, you need to make sure not to close it behind you and to push for the people who couldn't have yet come through. And it's going to be a long process and they're going to find you annoying. But I really recall one of the first conferences I ever went to was like a young anarchist, you know, and being so impressed by a man on a podium of all male speakers saying that there's no woman here on this stage, so he wants to give up his space. And he was immediately told off by other very aspiring anarchists to cut the crap and just sit back. And so he did. But it was just this half attempt was enough to earn my friendship ever since. Now, this is a very sad place, of course, that you have to make do with the little that you get. But I think, you know, since then, yesterday we talked about women's representation as something that is self-explanatory, that is necessary. I think we've come a long, long way, and it needs to be celebrated and remembered duly so that we can gather the energy for the further steps, which are a lot. Sorry, that's all.
And Reka, can you also maybe give us an example of how you are trying to do that in your own work, because you're the editor-in-chief of Eurozine, and how can you open doors for other people? How do you do that?
Yes, I think as an editor, in most cases, the most important thing is to not only commission from the people that you already know and have heard of. That's always a huge mistake. And preferably, if you want to provide representation to certain groups, maybe ask people from those groups who they would recommend and not resort to the ones that you already saw on TV or read an article from. That's, of course, a first step. I think since Eurozine is mainly publishing in English, although in multiple languages, also beside the English, but our main surface is in English. One of the most important things that we also talked about at the previous iteration of this event is to keep the language barrier open and put up with the authors not being 100% native level proficient. Of course, there's other barriers too. So when commissioning for the Roma Holocaust Remembrance Day, for instance, last year, I did wait multiple months for the designated author to submit their piece. And I have gone through a bunch of people by the time we actually get there to have it materialized, because, and it is a very true phenomenon that, for instance, scholars of this field, especially, of course, Roma scholars of the field, are terrified to publish in more mainstream outlets than anything very academic, because they are bullied very heavily and they can expect the repercussions, quite like, you know, a whole lot of women would love to write, but they don't feel like they can put up with the level of trolling or bullying that they are going to get, and they are going to get it. So I think, you know, a more involved support and an understanding for why people take long, and it may not be operative. That's kind of a starting point. I really shouldn't be thinking that I know what they're going through. I may understand some of the aspects from parallels, you know, being an Eastern European woman and having experienced this sort of power position in that. But honestly, I think it's just, it's probably reminding oneself that it's not my experience that is the most important here, I guess. But that's a very vague answer.
Thank you. And I think it's really interesting indeed that you mentioned that we should give up space. Yesterday we spoke a lot about that we should take a space to speak out, and I think it's really important that we're mentioning here today as well that we should sometimes give up space and give space away. So I think that's really interesting. Thank you so much, Reka, for this reflection. I would like to ask Geraldine Schwartz to present her statement of today. And maybe you can say a little bit more about what you would like to share, but of course it's based on your book, Those Who Forget, translated in English, which is a family history story. And you have been in the Balie 2 times already in the past years, but maybe, so we know the story, but maybe some of the other participants don't. So maybe you can say something about the book and also related to what you would like to say today on the topic.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the team for organizing this very inspiring event. Well, I'm French and German. I live in Germany, and I've written a book about how Germany and other countries in Europe faced their fascist past after World War II and what impact it has on democracy through political education of citizens. And in my book, I take the example of my German family through 3 generations, my grandparents, my parents, and myself, and try to explain how it comes that my grandparents were living under a dictatorship in Europe at war, and I have the chance to live in a democracy in Europe at peace. Well, unfortunately, Anne-Marijn, you introduced my statement as being about democracy at large, but I think there has been so many great speakers about that subject that I would rather, especially yesterday, that I really decided to focus on how to make the European narrative more inclusive for non-native Europeans. And this is, of course, linked to the question of memory work I'm very fond of. So being myself at the crossroads of several cultures, French and German, I've always struggled to translate one specific German word into other languages. And this word is Heimat, which is more or less the equivalent of home, but with a somewhat negative connotation since the Third Reich misused the word Heimat. But actually, Heimat is a very beautiful term. It's just like home. It refers to a place where you feel actually usually good. It is linked to your childhood and to a place where you have strong emotional ties and also sensual ties. Its landscape, its cuisine, its humor, its language. And these roots are in Europe still very crucial as they give many citizens a sense of security in a complex, globalized world. But it also can feel suffocating, limiting, and feel you bound by birth. Sometimes it even can become very uncomfortable when one doesn't feel home at home anymore, or when Heimat is being used as a weapon for nationalism. And this is where Europe can intervene by offering a second home, not in the sense of replacing the first, because as I said, the first is very important, these roots, but of completing it by being the Heimat of choice, the home of choice. And this is a kind of cultural act, which implies a reflection on the values and the way of life you want to endorse. So the choice of Europe can sharpen the consciousness of our free will, and therefore also of our democratic responsibility. But how do you help people being part of this second Heimat, the second home, Europe, when they feel or are excluded? How can Europe avoid defining Heimat by criteria of inclusion and exclusion, as many nation states do? Many citizens feel excluded from Europe for different reasons. Yesterday, we mentioned those for whom European politics is not comprehensible. Today, we mentioned also those who don't feel socially recognized, acknowledged. I will try to focus on those who feel excluded because they are not part of the European narrative. I'm speaking about the non-native Europeans and their descendants. So contemporary European identity was mainly built on the memory of World War II and fascism, on the Holocaust, and also the Cold War. And this helped setting standards and concepts. Whereas the American dream is to erase each one's past in order to give a chance to take part in a common future wherever you come from, the European dream is the idea of all sharing a common history, inseparably linked to a common utopia. So, how do those who don't share this history and the dreams it shaped can feel included? Europe has to make room, this was already mentioned, making room for these other memories coming from migrants and their descendants. And actually, there is a very natural link between many of these migrants' memories and Europe. And this link is colonial history. But this common past is painful. Nevertheless, it is not doomed to create the tensions we are experiencing today with the debates around the so-called cancel culture, Black Lives Matter, or the tearing down of statues of colonial heroes. But because this memory was long thrust aside by the Europeans, it is coming back like a boomerang and threatening to divide parts of our European societies. Of course, it is hurting for native Europeans to take the role of perpetrator in history. And maybe that's why the memory of World War II took so much space in the last 7 decades, crushing other memories. Because at least in World War II, there were also heroes and resistance and victims among Europeans. Whereas in the colonial and slave history, the role of Europeans is pretty unambiguous. But if we all want to live together in solidarity and mutual understanding in Europe, this past needs to be part of the European narrative. However, this process should not be instrumentalized to stir up hatred or sectarianism, nor should it nourish a Manichaean view of the past or threaten the freedom of speech and of artistic expression. A development we are unfortunately witnessing today, I think in many countries, like the translation of the poetry of a Black poet by a white Dutch translator. I imagine you followed that, that story. So how do we overcome this victim versus perpetrator dialectic, which is all the more difficult to escape that it sticks to one's skin, colored versus white? First, I think there is no way out of this deadlock without an apology from European countries which still shy away from facing the shadows of their colonial past. The acknowledgement of the suffering of the victims of colonialism and slavery is indispensable, very crucial, even if the primary victims are not alive anymore, because memories of past violence are handed down in the families through images and stories, but also embodied behaviors. Second, a way to break this colored white antagonism would be to draw analogies between victims of colonialism and European native victim groups like LGBT, Jewish communities, women, victims of social inequalities, in order to create a multiracial and multicultural solidarity, which would therefore not be directed against Europe, but within the frame of Europe. And this could help to shape a more inclusive European narrative. Third, such a European narrative should not lead to the other extreme I've mentioned before, censorship or the so-called cancel culture. It should help establish an intercultural memory dialogue. Education, museums, memorial institutions, NGOs, politics of remembrance should adopt a more transnational and transcultural approach in order to find a common ground for all Europeans and try to mobilize our common memories of violence. Most of European countries and most of non-native Europeans have experienced wars, oppression, dictatorship. So it is about mobilizing this common memory to empower change, to raise an awareness that everybody has a role to play to shape a more democratic and inclusive Europe. And I don't know if I have still 3 minutes, Anne-Marijn. I don't listen, I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we have 2 more minutes.
Okay, that's good. So maybe I would like to finish my statement with enlarging the initial question. The initial question is how to include the voices of those who are not yet part of the discussion. And I would like to see how can Europe take part in the world discussion. What changes in Europe can also have an impact much beyond its borders, and much more than we think. I have to say, I don't really agree with the narrative of Europe's weakness and decline. I've heard also today and yesterday. We are stuck in this very negative narrative on Europe. And I think this doesn't match the whole reality. There have been several times in the past 10, 12 years that the EU has been so close to the abyss that the fall seemed inevitable. As a matter of fact, it didn't fall, which is quite extraordinary when you see all the conflicts we faced. And the Brexit actually helped to increase solidarity and visibility. And today the EU is no longer as faceless as it once was. But still, there is no widespread understanding of the European Union's weight in the world. Europe ranks among the top 3 economic powers of the world by all criteria. It is the most important export market for many countries, like the United States. It is Europe and not China, the largest partner in Africa. And it is interesting that the GDP per capita of the EU is with $47,000, 3 times the one in China. So why am I talking about Europe's purchasing power? It's because it makes Europe also a main global regulator in the world. There is a book about that, which I highly recommend, Anu Bradford, The Brussels Effect. She shows that by regulating the affairs of its internal market step by step, the EU is setting standards and criteria worldwide based on scientific, legal, and also moral competence. And this, whether it's chemicals, hormone-treated meat, child labor, emission standards, or, very important, data protection. Anu Bradford concludes in her book that in a way, the European Union makes the world a little bit better, a little bit fairer, a little bit cleaner, and more sustainable every day. And this helps raise awareness in many fields. But of course, if Europe wishes to assert more firmly its model of an open and democratic society, as opposed to authoritarian models like China, then Europe must set an example by being more inclusive and living its democratic values unequivocally, including social equality, and communicating them to its citizens through education. Voilà, that was the positive note about Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Geraldine. It was really, really interesting, this contribution. And I think it also very beautifully built up on the conversation we had yesterday and the conversation we had this morning. So thank you very much for that. And I think it's really interesting what you say, that Europe should set an example, and that you also showed 3 very concrete things we should do, and that we should acknowledge our history on one hand, that we should draw analogies between different victimized groups in Europe, and I think it's also really interesting that you show how we should keep on having conversations with each other and not build our own walls and hide behind it. I think that's really beautiful. I can imagine that there are some questions or reactions or reflections to this specific statement. Lina.
I find the statement very problematic. I'm like jumping on my seat. For me, like the idea of speaking about the colonial as past, as memory, is really problematic. The colonial is still happening. Europe is taking part of the global discussion by continuing wars in other places that outside Europe, by supporting very undemocratic, oppressive regimes all over the world. So this idea of also the need to, as if like Europe could take all its time to to lament and to reflect and to mourn and to build memorials and to negotiate, to write books, to create philosophy, education systems, all based on the experience of the world wars. And now we are all stressed because there are some groups who are demanding space to talk about their pain, which is still happening. It's not in the past. And then we need to ask them not to be aggressive and to be democratic and not to ask for things that threaten the models that are established in Europe, because we need to protect those. So for me, like there are for me, it's very, very much in support of everything that is institutional, this statement, and institutional in the sense of confirming again the dominant narratives. So yeah, I'm I'm a bit agonized by this. So I just want to share this.
Yeah, so Lina, if I'm hearing you well, you say these colonial structures are not only something of our history, which we should remember, but we should also acknowledge that many of these structures still exist today. I think that might be a good addition to actually to what Geraldine just said. I think it's a good point. Thank you so much.
Maybe I should answer to that.
Yeah, Shirley?
Yes. I'm afraid there might be a bit of a misunderstanding. Maybe I'll send the text again. Actually, the idea is to change the narrative. And the narrative of Europe, we should not underestimate how much history plays a crucial role in this narrative, and how much it is a criteria to feel being part of or not being part of. The statement was too short, so I wasn't able to mention also the Christian Jewish roots of Europe, which are obviously still very present, even in like countries. So this is not something we should underestimate, because it is something which is a criteria today to feel part of or not feel part of. So it's all first about the past, because we are the result of our past. So I'm not saying that today there is not something like discrimination or supporting countries which are dictatorships, but let's start at the beginning. Let's start where it actually started. I live in a country in Berlin, in Germany, where there is not so much tension with the colonial past, even if there is also a colonial past. But I'm coming from France, and I can tell you the fact that France hasn't properly faced its past, its colonial past, is one of the main reasons why there are so many tensions in the society. It is about, and this is why I can't really receive your critic, because it doesn't match to the reality of what I said. I can't actually accept that countries don't acknowledge the suffering of the victims, you know. It is very important, this step, in any, even when in a personal level, when you quarrel with somebody, or when you feel that you have been mistreated, this step of looking at the past and first acknowledging your responsibility in the past for a situation which still today has a lot of impact. This is where we should start.
Geraldine, it doesn't have impact. It's still ongoing. Colonialism is still ongoing. Yeah, France still colonizes all of Africa. It's also colonizing is ongoing in the way the French with Algerian or Moroccan or Tunisian background who live in France are kept in certain positions in the society totally. So apology is not enough.
I'm not saying it's not enough. And I'm more for a nuanced approach, because I don't think it actually helps the debate to radicalize and diabolize. To say that today it's colonialism is really relativizing how it was at this time. And I don't think it's actually respecting the victims of colonialism, how it was at this time, to say that today the victims of France in Morocco are the same as 70 years ago in Algeria.
The victims in the Mediterranean are enough.
We're afraid I'm afraid we're running a bit out of time, and I would like to thank you both very much for your contributions. And I think that it's indeed a really important discussion. And also, Geraldine, thank you for your reflection, because I can understand that a 5-minute statement is not enough to put all the nuances in. And Lina, I would like to thank you as well for pointing out that we should have an eye for the still existing structures which are really problematic. So I think it's really an important point you both make here, and thank you very much for that. I would like to go actually to the last part of this session, because everyone has to leave as well at 12:30, and I would very much like to encourage you to keep on having this conversation also after this session. But for now, we have to actually go to the last part and wrap everything up. And I would like to ask you to, we have prepared 4 breakout groups for today, where we will ask you to put on sticky notes concrete recommendations which we can give to our politicians. And we would like to collect all your ideas. So all ideas and suggestions are really valuable, and it could be specific policy recommendations, but it could also be more general recommendations. Of course, a lot has been mentioned already by the speakers of today, so thank you very much. But we would very much like to collect all the ideas now, so we also have an overview of the recommendations we can collect and bring over to the audience after this. We have prepared a Jamboard where you can see the question your group will be answering, and you can draw a sticky notes to the page and write down what you would like to add. So I would like to ask everyone, please feel free to take a sticky note and put it on the board, and we will have a final plenary discussion at the end of the session. And then we will also ask Marina for a short summary of what has been discussed. You see the Jamboard link in the chat now. So if you can please click on it, so I can check whether everyone is on it and can see the question. If you have troubles finding the Jamboards, please show that you have a problem in any way, and I will give you some time to enter it. And if everyone is there, I will ask Simon to start the breakout sessions, and you will be having 20 minutes for this part of the conversation in smaller groups. Each of the organizational team will take part in 1 breakout group. So Marta, me, Stefan, and Simon will all be in 1 group.
Hello, Zoom. The person called Zoom. Can you hear me?
We're almost back with the group, but where did the rest go? Usually these breakout sessions end automatically, and then you will all be back in the session.
No, I see people that have to go through the waiting room before coming back. So I'm admitting people as we speak, and I think everyone should be back in a few seconds.
Yeah, great. I hope it went well in the breakout sessions. We had a really interesting conversation, and also some really good recommendations to the European politicians. I hope you were able to kind of grasp and reflect on what we've heard during the sessions today and yesterday as well, and to try to formulate it into recommendations that we could do to our politicians, both on the national and on the European levels. Unfortunately, we don't have time to share everything back in the group, but what I would like to ask you is to take a look at the Jamboard, because you can still click on the link and you can see everything that has been mentioned there. We will also save it and send it to you together with all the images and pictures that we will send you on Monday. So I would really like to ask you also to take a look at where the others came up with, because I think it's really inspiring and also important to take a look at what they got out of the discussion and the main points that we spoke about today. So yeah, I would like to thank you for your contributions today and to the breakout groups. And before we really close off the session, I would like to give the words to Marina for a brief sum up and a presentation of all her work of this morning. Yesterday it was really great to see what she came up with. So Marina, I will give you the words, and I'm very much looking forward to your work. Can you share your screen, or should I?
Yes, I can do. Hang on. Oh, I can't actually. I will need to be housed again. Sorry, I dropped my connection, and I missed the.
Simon can make you a co-host.
Could you? Thank you.
That also gives us some time to see if everyone is back, but I think they are.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon. Okay, so there I am. So carrying on from our conversation from yesterday, the second part of the conversation with kind of a different question around how can we include the voices of those who are not yet part of the discussion? And we had the keynote of Lina Isa, how to include these voices and narratives in imagining and practicing life and democracy in Europe. And she was talking about a process that starts with deep empathy and the experience of a stand-on to take someone, the other person's place and wonder, what if I took your place? How does your body feel? What is your real experience? And get in touch with a deep listening, identity, the place of the identity, creating a democratic self and creating new narratives and stories based on deep understanding of each other's experience. There was an invitation for all of you to double up and invite someone else to this conversation today. So we were many today here. And also we had a keynote from Barbara Kenny talking about an open space that is safe, that is welcome for children, for diversity, for new generations, with sign language and based on consent and trust, and where there is no potential aggression, and where they are aware they don't know everything, they don't represent everyone, and space for proposals and activities and culture, and there is emerging creative energy and action. Also, there was a reflection on new generations, how to make systems more responsive to new generation needs. Important to listen to them, to be aware of long-term challenges. And also a powerful question, where is the balance between the horizontal and the vertical structures?
Nice.
Are our representation systems working? You were wondering, do we need representation really? Even there was this question, are there other ways to organize ourselves? Someone mentioned that in Europe, we are not taking real action and we have so many resources. We're quite a privileged society. Also a mention of a chair that was offered to be taken by a woman. And I found that little story very, very interesting.
Also about giving up space, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then we had the keynote of Geraldine, society whose democracy is focused on shaping the future. And she took us on a journey on how to make European narrative more inclusive. How can Europe be a second home for those who are excluded and they are looking for a shelter, and how to build a common story, how to include the ones with a different story, and talking about painful past and how that needs to be integrated in the new narratives, and the importance of apologizing and creating a multinational and multicultural story together. And then you've been in your groups working about recommendations for national and European politicians that I'm sure were very enriched. And yeah, I think that's all I got from you guys. And thank you so much for these insightful conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marta. This was really, really great again, and I'm impressed by the way and the speed in which you can visualize everything and make a great summary of this morning's discussion as well. So yeah, maybe a big applause for you, Marina.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you much. Thank you very much. And I would also like to thank all of today's participants who shared their very valuable insights, both in the keynotes, in the reflections, in the statements, in all the personal statements. And Lena, specifically, big thanks to you for your keynotes and for the collective visualization, as you called it before. I think it was really strong idea that we really multiplied the group and actually started with the practice that we need to do much more often, I think, also during our daily lives, but also when we look at politics. So I think it was another really important discussion today. We are going to write a report where we transcribe the discussions we had, which we will send to you later on. But we will first of all share all of today's images, etc., which you can also share via your networks and social medias. We will do some posts with some clips from this conversation next week. So also please feel free to share it. And as you know, our main goal of these civic councils is also to write a manifesto and to publish it after we had all the 3 sessions. And of course, we will share everything with you before as well. A big thanks. It was a pity that we weren't able to meet each other in Palermo, because I have the feeling that the sun is shining, and here in Amsterdam, at least, it's still raining and it's really terrible. So I really hope to be able to meet you someday live here in Amsterdam or somewhere else. And I would like to thank you very much again on behalf of the whole team of the Forum and European